I do have. I like to also ask a question, not update related. It won't drive you crazy. A pure SEO question, which I haven't done ever. I think so.
All right. Let me just say welcome, everyone, to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. Today we're using the new setup as a surprise. I hope everything works well. I couldn't save the questions that were submitted. I copied them into a text file, so I have them here, but they're not in the normal Q&A part. There's a link to a Google Slides Q&A where you can submit questions if you're watching this live, I guess. After the Hangout, of course, these questions will kind of be gone. Barry, do you want to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, so I'm not going to ask about updates or anything like that. I'm going to ask about a pure SEO question. So somebody came to me, called me on the phone, asked me, what would you do if you have like a kind of like a thesaurus or dictionary type of website where you want to rank for the keyword, let's say skew, and the keyword skewed? The same kind of definition. Should you redirect the skewed to the skew, or have both pages set independently with the differentiation part where, the skewed part versus the skewed part? Should you have them two different pages? Should you redirect one to the other? Should you use a canonical tag? Because it seems like when you do the redirect, you don't rank for skewed in some cases. I did some searches to see how Google ranks these things, and skewed, when you have a permanent page for skewed, does rank higher than the keyword, the pages just ranking for skew.
So in general, this kind of comes into the whole question of, should I combine pages and have one page, or should I split it out into separate pages? And that type of question comes up with regards to pretty much all kinds of sites. So if you have a shop, maybe you have like different article pages, and maybe you combine some of those into one strong article kind of category type page. And maybe in some cases you have individual product pages which are completely separate. So that's something where you're kind of balancing having a stronger page, like one page for both of those words, with individual pages for each of those words separately. So you could make individual pages for each of those words separately, but that just means you kind of need to have content on those pages that's actually kind of relevant and useful individually for each of those versions. So that's kind of the split that you have to kind of make that call yourself, where either you make one stronger page or you make multiple kind of like weaker pages, which still have to kind of stand on their own.
So you wouldn't say there's like a best practice in general. You'd say it depends on the situation, and they should just test it out both ways and see what works best.
Yeah, definitely.
OK. Just wanted to confirm that because it was interesting. I mean, the question does come up a lot. In this case, yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's something where, for example, if you're selling shoes, maybe you have one page for each shoe model. And maybe you have a really special version of that shoe as well, where you want to say, well, this really special version is something that I do want to split out because it has value of its own. It's not just a variation of the existing page. So maybe a specific color scheme that's really flashy and unique. That's nothing maybe you'd want to split off. But otherwise, like the different shoe sizes, you probably want to put together on one page and just put all of those sizes onto one version.
Yeah, so when we're talking about e-commerce and categories and that type of stuff, colors, and that all makes sense and so forth. But when you're talking about definitions, it's kind of slightly different because,
yeah, I mean,
you do want to rank to the definition. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a matter of either you have one stronger page or you have multiple kind of weaker pages. And sometimes it makes sense to have really strong page if there's a lot of competition for that term, for example. And sometimes it makes sense to kind of spread it out where you do have something unique to add for each of those versions.
OK, thank you.
All right. So let me run through some of the questions that were submitted. And it looks like people are already using the new feature as well. So we'll see how that works out. Top question There has been a lot of chatter regarding an update over the weekend. Can you confirm if this was Penguin related or another core algorithm update? It wasn't Penguin, but we do roll out a lot of updates over time. Sometimes multiple updates even come kind of time-wise simultaneously when you see the effect. So this is something that isn't really a kind of update that we would announce individually. It wasn't Penguin, so you can, I guess, cross that one off your list. But there are lots of different updates that we do. We make thousands of updates every year, and most of them we don't give specific names. We don't call out or announce individually. Second question here, there are sites using aggregate rating on category pages versus product pages. Many of those listings are receiving star ratings in the search results. Google's guidelines specifically state not to do that. Can rich snippets be removed for that manually or by algorithm? We do take action manually on rich snippet spam. We have a rich snippet spam report form that you can use if you see some of this. And we do have algorithms that try to recognize this as well. When we take manual action on rich snippets, specifically turn off all rich snippets for that site. So that's something where if you're seeing this flagged in Search Console, we flag this with all other manual actions, then that would remove all of the rich snippets for your site. So that's something where if you do have rich snippets that you want to have shown, then I try to resolve that. On soft 404s, should we remove URLs from sitemap XML and add them when we have a result? If so, is it normal to add and remove a URL every other day or week? In general, if it's a soft 404, I wouldn't put it in a sitemap file, because the sitemap file contains URLs that you do want to have indexed. So if this is a page that has no content of its own, if it's essentially an error page that's returning 200, then you probably don't want to have that in a sitemap XML file. That said, the sitemap file helps us to improve our crawling. It's not that it replaces our crawling. So removing a URL from the sitemap file will not stop us from crawling that URL. We'll still try to crawl it every now and then. If you do put content on that URL after some time, then I would definitely put it in a sitemap file again with the appropriate new change date, so that we can recognize that this is something new and updated, and that we can pick that up and use that as a URL for indexing as well. OK, another question here. Does Google decide that such and such a page is low quality based on user behavior data from search? Like majority of people clicked on a page but didn't like it, so you reduce the quality of that page. We generally don't do it on a per-page basis like that. We do use these kind of signals when we evaluate algorithms overall. So if we're comparing multiple versions of an algorithm, or if we're doing an hypothesis and say, well, we think this would be a really good way to improve the search results, then we do look at how users interact with those search results that were affected by this algorithm. But individually, it generally doesn't make sense. And it's not really the case that you can easily just tell that the users didn't like this, and therefore the quality of the page is bad. Maybe they're just getting that information quickly from those pages, and they're happy with that. So that's something that is really kind of hard to do on a per URL basis.
And how much do you take the quality reviewer, like the Google quality reviewer, how much of that, whatever they report back to you, how much of that do you take seriously, or how much do you take that into consideration?
We take that very seriously, but we use that to evaluate our algorithms. So it's not the case that we would use that to evaluate an individual site. Say, well, this is kind of like a low-quality-ish site. We'll kind of demote it in search. But we do use it to evaluate our algorithms. So what happens is we give them, I don't know, a list of search results pages with the different algorithms kind of playing a role on those search results pages. And they'll tell us that this search result is better than this one. And we'll look at it like that. And that's something we do use to evaluate our algorithms. But it's not that we would say, well, the quality rater said this search result was bad, therefore, all of the sites that were listed there will be demoted in our search results. It's more a matter of understanding which of these algorithms is working better.
I see. OK, thanks.
So John, just following up this.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, go for it, Don.
I'm working with a site that is on. Are you familiar with the Commerce? It's an e-commerce platform.
Which one? I didn't catch the name.
Big Commerce.
Big Commerce.
Big Commerce. Yes. Okay, so the client had already had, and they have all these different color options of the. It's a furniture store, so they have all these options. And when they migrated over from WordPress to BigCommerce, they took all color options, and every color option, exact same content, each individual page. So if there's 12 color options, the content's identical for every one of those pages, and of course it creates a URL for red, blue, green, whatever. And within the BigCommerce backend, they don't allow custom canonical. Every one of those colors, whether it be red, blue, or green of a particular sofa, is canonicalizing to itself. Do you foresee this being a big problem?
It's hard to say, big or small. So it's probably suboptimal in that, like with the question Barry had in the beginning, you're creating a lot of individual versions of these pages, which means that they kind of have to build up value of their own, which makes it a lot harder to rank these pages for more competitive queries, I'd say. So that's something where sometimes it makes sense to combine multiple versions into one stronger page, and sometimes it makes sense to kind of split them out separately. One way you could look at this is to see what kind of queries are going to your pages. If people are explicitly looking for those color variations, and you can tell that, like, showing them a generic colored sofa when they're really searching for a red sofa is going to be a bad idea, then maybe having those different color pages makes sense. On the other hand, if people are searching for a sofa and then the color is kind of secondary, more like an attribute for them, then maybe it makes sense to combine all of those into one page. But from a technical point of view, I don't know how BigCommerce would handle that, or how other e-commerce systems generally handle that.
But from Google's perspective, if you have a whole bunch of different color options like that, a dozen different color options in one case, and they all contain the exact same content on the page, the pictures are different, but Google can't see the pictures, can't see the color. And they canonicalize to each other, so there's, this is the original content. Perspective, might that be a problem with, say, Panda?
No, that shouldn't be a problem. So it's not the case that we would see that as being spammy or a sign that it's low quality. It's mostly a matter of these pages just having to stand on their own. And you have all of these dozens of different variations for the same sofa, which means each of these variations has to kind of stand on its own. So it's not that there would be, like, from a web spam team, that they would look at this and say, oh, this is bad, we will demote the site, or that the quality algorithms will look at this and say, oh, each color is listed individually, therefore it's a low-quality site. That's not the case. But essentially, we look at these URLs separately and say, well, this is a page like this, and it has this text on it, these photos on it. We'll rank it individually. So,
content?
Sorry? I didn't quite catch that.
Even if it's 12 pages of the exact same content?
Yeah, usually. Yeah. I mean, we'll recognize that it's duplicate content. We'll try to, like, understand that this is a kind of one thing when someone is searching, that we don't show, like, all of these different versions. But essentially, they have to stand on their own.
OK, I understand.
All right, let me run through some more of the old style questions, and then we'll go look at the new style questions and see how that's working out. On the new style questions, you can also use the thumbs up, thumbs down to kind of push things up or down. Let's see. We're running an A/B testing, test/A, I think, as a folder structure versus test/B on content. We block test/B in robots text, and the redirection is JavaScript redirection. Our test/A shows blocked by robots in search results. Why is that? What's the best way to run an A/B test on like a 50% content difference? So in general, we recommend it so that Googlebot can see both of these versions and that you just use a rel canonical pointing at the version that you do want to have indexed. So in a case like this where you have A and B versions, just make sure that your standard or your kind of the default version that you're testing against is the canonical. Just point the canonical to your standard version. We'll be able to crawl both of these. We'll see the canonical, and we can kind of fold things together into the right version. Using robots text essentially means that we don't really understand the difference between these two pages because we can't actually see them. We see one version. We see sometimes a redirect to the other version that we can't crawl. And we don't really know what the connection is between those two versions. So I wouldn't use robots text, and instead let us crawl those versions, use a rel canonical so that we understand what it is that you're trying to do. And in general, we should be able to pick that up properly.
John, sorry, just one question about this issue.
Yes.
What if the URL doesn't change? I mean, if you change the contents, server side, but the URL is still the same.
Yeah, you can also do that. So in a case like that, what we essentially recommend is that you don't treat Googlebot as any different kind of user.
Okay.
So that sometimes we might see one version, sometimes we might see the other
so it doesn't
version.
matter. I mean, it doesn't hurt. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
doesn't hurt is really hard to say because if you're running an A/B test of like a page with text and a page with just a video on it,
Yeah.
and any text, so we would have trouble ranking that page. But
Sure.
if you're doing an A/B test, something that for Googlebot will be pretty much equivalent.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Let me look at the new style questions. We have one question with 2 votes, so we should take that one. I don't actually know how to take it, so I'll just be scrolling through these and hope I don't miss any. I can see my star ratings when I do a site query for my site. However, I don't see them in the normal search results. Are there any methods to gain Google's trust to show rich snippets? It's an 11-year-old information forum. So in general, we use 3 elements to determine whether or not to show rich snippets in the search results. On the one hand, it has to be technically implemented properly. On the other hand, it has to be implemented such that from a policy point of view, it's used correctly. So you're following our rich snippets guidelines. For example, if you're marking something up as a recipe, then it should really be a recipe and not, I don't know, a shoe, for example, unless you're cooking shoes. But that's maybe outside of the scope. And third, I lost track. Third, we have to make sure that the quality of the website in general is of high quality. So you can double check the technical implementation using our testing tools. That's the first thing I'd always do. You can double check the policies by reading up our policies in our guidelines, in our documentation, maybe by asking in the help forum to see if other people can double check that it's really OK. The quality, however, is something that our algorithms determine on their own. And that's not something where you can just set a meta tag on the page and we'll see it as high quality. So there's no shortcut to kind of have Google see a site as being high quality. That's really something that kind of has to be built up over time in a consistent way. So that's probably something that takes time. Usually, if you do a site query for a site, we will show the rich snippets if it's implemented technically correct. So that's a good way to kind of double check that we can pick up the markup properly. And if we're not showing it in normal search results, then that's really a sign that we're essentially not sure about the quality of the website. So I don't have any generic tips to say this is what you need to watch out for when working on improving the quality of the website. One thing I would point at is the old Panda blog post. I think 23 questions you can ask yourself about a high-quality site. That's, I think, always a good reference. And that's something that I'd have someone look at it, the site who's not associated with your site. So instead of you looking at your site and saying, oh, this is the best site ever, really take someone who's not associated with your site, who's not associated with your business, and let them look at your site, let them look at some competitor's site, ask them the relevant questions from that blog post, and see what kind of issues they come up with that you could be working on. Let's see. Our e-commerce site was designed with each color as a unique variation. I think we looked at this before. We have an e-commerce site and are about to launch a new company to sell a different range of product. However, 500 products out of 5,000 on the new site will also be in the existing site with identical titles and descriptions. Should we be concerned about duplicate content? If you're launching a new site and you're including some of these that you already have on your other site, one thing you can do here is just use the rel canonical. So you can let us know which of these versions is your preferred version. So instead of taking the same content and kind of splitting it, diluting it across multiple sites, or in this case, two sites, you can use the rel canonical to let us know that this page is available on both of these sites, but you prefer to have this one actually indexed. And then we'll be able to take all of the signals and combine them into that version. Our blocked resources report is showing an external host that we use for tracking code on every page of our site. Their robots text disallows their whole domain. There's no visual impact to this service. Is this something we need to take any action on? In general, no. This is not something you'd need to take action on. Usually, you also see in the blocked resource report whether or not we think this is an important element of the page or not. Like, I think we have like high, medium, low importance that we sometimes show there. For some resources, we can't determine that directly, but that can give you some advice as well. In general, if it has no visible effect on the page, then that's not something that we would worry about with regards to being a blocked resource. If it did have a visual effect, so for example, if it were an API that's available on some other service that shows a map with different locations where your company is available, or with different opening hours, or whatever you have, then that would obviously be something that we'd like to have indexed, because then we can pick up this content and actually show it in our search results based on that. But if it's a tracking code, if it's like a tracking pixel, if it's just a JavaScript snippet that has no visible effect at all, then that's not something that you'd need to kind of open up for crawling. We have canonicals for the original content and rel alternate links for the mobile version, and mobile switch is prepended. Both sites are in Search Console, but the regular site shows massive mobile-friendly errors. Shall we have two sitemaps with alt tag in both? Let me just reread. So my feeling, without looking at the site specifically, if you have like the www version as a desktop site and an mdop version as your mobile site, and you have this link between those two pages, then if that link is set up properly, you shouldn't be seeing mobile-friendly errors in Search Console. So my feeling is that perhaps there's something happening here where we're not able to recognize that connection properly, and therefore we're showing these mobile-friendly errors. So that's something where I'd kind of double check what's actually happening there. One thing you could do here is use the Fetch as Google feature to see what Google actually sees, to double check that we can pick up the rel alternate links appropriately, that we have the rel canonical from the mobile back to the desktop properly, that both of these are in the head section of the pages, and there's nothing like dynamically happening with those pages that shuffles the head around. Those are probably the main things I'd watch out for here. Another kind of symptom of something like this would be if you see the m-dot versions of the pages showing up in the desktop search results. And that's really a sign that somehow we're not seeing that connection properly. So those are kind of things I try to look into.
And also the mobile-friendly, the warnings, there's a delay, right, John? Because sometimes you'll see something that's fixed already, and that's been sitting there since like March and hasn't been updated.
Yeah, March seems like a long time, but one thing to keep in mind, that's a really good point, is that we do these errors are aggregated based on indexing. So since we don't index the whole website at once, we kind of do it step by step as we crawl the website. Some of these pages might be recrawled daily. Some of them might be recrawled every couple of months or every half year or so. So if you make a significant change on your pages with regards to mobile-friendly or with regards to structured data or AMP or anything else that's kind of in one of these aggregated reports, you'll usually see kind of a jump when you initially do that for the first pages that we recrawl and re-index. And then it kind of curves upwards, where over time we'll get closer and closer to like 99, 95, 100%, depending on your site. And it just takes a while for everything to be reprocessed and re-indexed. So that's definitely something to also look at. If you know that you've made changes there, and you're looking at that, and you're looking at the dates on those errors, and they're all kind of old, then maybe this is something that just hasn't been reprocessed yet. And that's perfectly fine, too. You can help us to understand that you've made significant changes there by using a sitemap file with a new last modification date. In those cases, we'll recognize a new last modification date for those URLs and try to recrawl those a little bit faster. We're working on our website with rich snippets on the homepage to include YouTube, Twitter, and other social media, as well to extend search. For some reason, it's not showing up. Is there a way to verify things are working? So I assume this is the social profiles markup that you can add to your pages. Some of these things take a while to kind of take effect. So if you've just now made these changes, put that markup on there, then that's something that might take up to a couple of weeks to actually be reprocessed. One thing you could do is maybe go to the help forum and post there if you're seeing that this is still not updating after some time, because the folks in the help forum are pretty good at recognizing and figuring out what kind of issues are common with specific kinds of markup. And they're really good at escalating the weird cases that don't work right to us. So that's something that might be valuable to try out. How much weight does user intent have nowadays compared to other metrics like backlinks, brand reputation, actual content on the site, on-page ads, etc.? I don't think I have any kind of weight number that I can give you there. In general, we take over 200 factors for crawling, indexing, and ranking. So there are lots of different factors. And it's not the case that we would give each factor the same weight for every site and every query. And some of this can change over time. For example, if you have a really good article on one specific topic, we might show that in the search results because it's really good and relevant to users looking for that content. However, if that topic happens to suddenly become really popular and almost newsworthy, then maybe we'll show other content that's more focused on the new versions of that content. So these are things that can and do change over time. It's not the case that any specific factor has a fixed weight, and we would say across all sites, across all search results, this factor is this strong. So this really varies across things, which from my point of view makes it more, I guess, interesting because you don't have to do everything exactly the same as your competitors. If like your competitors are building on a really strong brand, then maybe there are other things that you could do to drive attention to your website that still evens things out. That still means that your site is shown competitively in those search results.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. My first question is strictly linked to the next one about the bad quality websites. Because the user intent was the only explanation I could find, because I can see very bad quality websites at the top of the search results for some keywords, whereas very high quality branded, very non-branded websites are just at the bottom of the page. And the only explanation I could find is because those websites are giving away free stuff, and the users find right away what they want. Of course, even though those websites are most of the times illegal or crappy, full of ads. So what's exactly the quality Google is looking for? So you see, we get confused sometimes because of that. So
that's probably a tricky situation where it's hard to say what exactly we're picking up there. So that's really hard to say there. One thing I'd recommend doing, if you run across searches like that, maybe send them to us so that we can take a look as well. You can send them to me directly on Google+. I generally don't have that much time to reply individually, but I do forward all of these on to the team.
Okay,
and,
good.
The search quality team takes these kind of reports really seriously. So if there's something where you're seeing really bad search results for individual queries,
it's crazy, even because there are also websites where you go inside, you're looking for something. We are in the sheet music industry, so you are searching for free sheet music for whatever. You're going on this website where you find just ads showing downloaded here. So just people go inside and download whatever, I don't know, and maybe Google detects that like an accomplished action from the user intent when actually wasn't a user action intent. So I get in touch with you as you were suggesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there a way to accredit SEO in an iframe embed to the parent URL? Not really sure what it is you're trying to do there. With regards
so I can elaborate a little bit.
Oh, great! You're here. Perfect.
Yeah. So we are a UGC platform. It's used for content authoring. We have a variety of formats that creators use to create their content on our site. It's accreditable to those publishers, and they take it and embed it in their site. And what we like to do is actually accredit them for it's basically their content, but when they embed it in their sites, they lose a lot of their SEO ranking because it's embedded. Is there anything that can be done here?
So you'd like them to be able to take that content and use it on their site as if it were part of their site directly. Is that correct?
Exactly. And actually, I would say enjoy the credit of their work in their site.
Hard to say. We do try to take the iframe content into account when we render the pages. So what will happen is we'll try to render the page, see the iframe, take some of that content into account for indexing. So if you specifically search for that content, you'll sometimes see that in the search results as well. But there's no simple way where you can just say, well, count this as if it were full content on the page. There's always kind of this aspect of, do we rank this page because it has that content iframed, or do we rank the iframe content itself separately? So that's kind of the two aspects there. One thing that I don't know might work is if you use JavaScript to embed that content instead of using an iframe. I don't know if that would significantly change things. That might be something worth testing to kind of try it out to see if that's actually possible or not. Sometimes that there might be an easy way to do that, where you just have like a snippet of JavaScript that pulls in the content from your server and shows it with JavaScript rendered on the page rather than using iframes. I don't know if that would really make a big difference with regards to how it ranks that content, but it might be worth testing.
OK, got it. My other question is that for content that is created, can you still hear me?
Yes.
OK. So for content that is creating using a Google Angular form, we create content that is based on steps, right? And in this framework, when you create this content, we see that it doesn't index stuff that is still in the DOM, waiting to be rendered on screen. Is there something that we can do to have this content indexed for SEO?
We should be able to pick that up in most cases. So there are some things to watch out for there. I did a Google Plus post, I think in March or April of this year, about things to watch out for with regards to JavaScript. You provide some kind of safe fallback, that you use a clean URL structure and not just use the hash for URL segments. Those are two things. There are also, I think, 3 or 4 JavaScript methods that we don't support in Googlebot's rendering. So either kind of test for those methods or just don't use them if that's possible. Maybe you can use a polyfill for some of those. Those are also listed in that Google Plus post. Okay. I can pull that out afterwards as well.
That'll be awesome. Thank you very much.
We're working on improving that a little bit. On the one hand, improving the rendering. On the other hand, improving our recommendations. I suspect we'll have a blog post, I don't know, later this month, early next month, sometime around then, when we have all of this kind of really worked out well. But in general, this should work if you're using Angular. You can test with the fetch and render feature in Search Console to kind of see what does Googlebot actually render there.
OK. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. All right. Oh, we have an anonymous question. OK. In this case, it works as well. I'm working on a website for a few months now for a photographer. For some reason, Google marked the website as spam. At this point, I've sent 2 requests that have been approved, but right after the spam is lifted, it comes back again. Please help. The old website was erased. So what would probably help here is a URL. So you can send me a URL by Google+, for example. I can take a look at that together with the web spam team, and we can see if there's something that's going wrong on our side, or maybe if there are other problems happening there. So the last comment you mentioned is the old website was erased. One thing to watch out for when it comes to web spam reconsideration requests is that the web spam team wants to see actual content on those pages. So if you have a website that was spammy and you say, oh, I just want to get this website reconsidered, taking down the whole website and then doing a reconsideration request generally won't work, because the web spam team will say, on the one hand, there's nothing here that could show up in the search results anyway, so manual action doesn't change anything. On the other hand, they don't know what the final content will actually be. So usually, if you take it all down, that means you probably want to put something new up again, and we just want to make sure that the new content is actually in line with what we're looking for. So if you're doing a reconsideration request, always make sure that the content is actually live on the site, so that the web spam team can take a look at that and say, hey, this is really fantastic. You did a great job of cleaning this up. We'll lift that manual action. And the same applies for rich snippets as well. If you have a rich snippets manual action, then don't just remove all of the structured data markup and say, oh, I took everything away. It's OK now. But actually put the markup back the way that you would have it afterwards as well, so that the team can look at that and say, hey, this is great use of the markup. We'll take that into account and accept this reconsideration request. A website that gets about 1,000 repeat brand visitors via search results every month. They seek information on my website and specific resources on my site, yet I am still hit by site-wide algorithm. I think Panda. What should I focus on more to increase rankings? It's hard to say. So in general, when it comes to these kind of broader quality algorithms, we look at the website overall to try to figure out where should we kind of fit this site in. And that means we look at the various pages that we do have from your website and try to understand what the overall picture is like. So one thing you could watch out for here is to see if there are parts of your website that are really still kind of low quality-ish that you could be working on improving, and actually improving those parts. Other things I guess you could be looking at is kind of going through that 23 questions blog post that I mentioned before about the quality of a site, and having someone external to your website give you advice. So instead of you looking at your own website and saying, oh, this is fantastic, have someone who's kind of not tied into your business, not tied into your website, give you that honest feedback that some random person coming to your site might be able to give you. So those are kind of the two things that I would be watching out for there. I run a nonprofit informational site about vegan athletes. The featured snippets for vegan athletes taken from other sites contains factual inaccuracies. How do we petition for them to be fixed? We tried the feedback button already. So the feedback button is actually the best way to do this, because that does go back to the team. I'd make sure if you do submit feedback to submit feedback that's easily understandable and kind of reasonable. So sometimes we'll see people use the feedback button and just like submit curses in all caps. And when our systems aggregate that feedback and try to figure out which of this feedback is actually actionable, that's probably not so actionable. So give us some reasonable feedback there so that we understand what your concerns are. And that's something that over time our systems will be able to take into account. Obviously, we generally don't just switch from one side to another for featured snippets just based on the feedback alone. We have to make sure that this is something that our algorithms are really picking up on properly. But sometimes this kind of feedback does help us to improve those algorithms. And over time, we'll be able to take that into account. All right. We have, I think, like 15 minutes left. Maybe I'll just open it up to more questions from you. And depending on how it goes, see what else pops up in the Q&A queue.
It's an interesting penguin question.
All right.
It's just more like, so whatever we saw last week on Friday, and if penguin comes whenever it's supposed to come, I don't care when, but when it comes, is it going to have the same effect as last week, or is it something that we're not supposed to see it at all? Like the effect, like we're not supposed to see these changes, right?
Well, people see changes. If nobody sees the changes, then we're probably not making good changes, right?
Well, no, I mean
If
like,
we work, it should have a visible
in
effect.
other words, shifts. I mean, we're going to see shifts, but I mean, with Penguin, is it supposed to be like a bigger shift?
I'm not sure how that'll actually be rolled out. We are working on an announcement for that, though. So when it's ready, we'll let you know.
Oh, wow.
I think in this case, maybe just multiple things came together, and individually, they're not things that we would announce separately. So
You will announce Penguin then before the update.
I don't know about before, but we'll try to get the timing so that we don't confuse everyone.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if everything were just like a lot faster, but sometimes we have to take it as it comes.
But it's taking a long time. It seems to be that, I guess, internally, people, like Gary was saying, every department has its own thing, and I guess it just seems to take longer for some reason, I guess.
Sometimes things take longer than we expect, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we see that across the board. It's not specific to search algorithms. Sometimes we'll see features where we'll test them out, and then we'll see, oh, this will launch in a couple of days, and then it just gets dragged out for a really long time until everything is actually working the way it should be working.
John, regarding the pop-up algorithm coming up in next year, and so if the site, I don't know, sites like news websites, they have the pop-up coming up. I think it's like 20 seconds in while you're in the site, and then all of a sudden, you got to sign up in order to continue reading the article. Is that still considered as a spam penalty for something like that? Like if I'm like 3 seconds into the site and then boom, the pop-up comes up and like, sign up. Here's your, what's your email, blah blah blah. Like that, I understand. That's annoying.
I don't think we'll have like any specific numbers or seconds or parts that we would like communicate on that. So that's probably a bit trickier. I believe we're working on some more information on that, but I'm not sure like what the current status is there.
John, on that subject, why is it mobile only, the interstitial penalty, if that's the right word for it? As in, the whole point, the explanation of why it's there is because it's unbelievably annoying, and I think that's kind of universally agreed, apart from by people that have sites that have these. But why is it mobile only? Because there are so many sites out there that would do well. They're sitting at the top of the SERPs. There's Pinterest, there's Forbes, there's a number of sites which have potentially good content, but they're very, very annoying and they hide that content. Surely they should be penalized in the same way.
It's just particularly annoying on mobile. That's I think the main point there, where especially on mobile, it's really problematic.
But I don't understand. But why? I mean, there are certain aspects of mobile. So sometimes the interstitial is especially large and you can't close it. But Google could then theoretically just penalize those, or whereas they are penalizing all interstitials on mobile, and interstitials aren't particularly. They're not any more annoying on mobile than they are on desktop, unless that interstitial has been done in a certain way. So do you see what I'm saying? I think there's a kind of subtle difference there. I don't think that if a big screen kind of appears, if a big interstitial appears on your mobile, and you just have to tap it for it to disappear, that's every bit as annoying as if a big interstitial appeared on desktop and you had to click it. So I'm just trying to understand the difference here. I mean, I'm very anti-interstitial, so.
We just want more penalties. Just keep giving us penalties.
To, I guess, either download their app or kind of some sites just you can't kind of close the pop-up. It's very hard on the screen.
So I guess on mobile, I think there are the multiple things that come together. On the one hand, the whole speed aspect, where if you have to download all of this interstitial stuff or do like another jump from there, that's particularly annoying on mobile. And also from the UI, it's something that it's particularly hard to kind of jump through to any kind of interstitial on mobile. I don't know what the plans are with regards to desktop, so I don't have anything specific to share in that area.
Okay, I mean, that was my next question. Is there a kind of a plan? Is Google perhaps doing mobile first, going to see how it goes, and then perhaps move on to desktop. But again, I do get the points about it can be difficult, and then there's of course the weight of the interstitial as to the page. But again, Google could relatively easily just penalize mobile sites where the interstitial was, say, larger than the screen size, or where the weight of the interstitial was large, but it's not. It's penalizing all interstitials on mobile, which is great. But based on that argument, it should therefore theoretically penalize them on desktop as well. This is just what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, it's awkward to have people here like we should penalize more websites, but
well, no, I'm not kind of saying penalize more. I'm kind of understanding that the reasons for penalizing one are exactly the same as the reasons for penalizing another. So I'm just trying to understand kind of what's happening here. And if again, it might just be that the grand plan is to do everything, but you're taking it slowly. I just want to find out some more.
I think another aspect is also just that there are more people searching on mobile nowadays than there are on desktop. So it's kind of like trying to tackle it there where it has the most impact, but also where the most users are. So that's, I think, some of the thinking behind that. But I totally agree that some of these things are just as annoying on desktop, and maybe we should find a solution there too.
I mean, according to a prediction by Gary Vaynerchuk, in 39 months from now, there'll be no more desktop traffic, so it's all mobile. So maybe they don't care about mobile.
Cool.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe people will just have like 39-inch phones or something crazy.
I think Google should penalize desktop websites in general. Everybody has to go mobile.
Man, you guys are so harsh. Like, geez, if you were making the rules at Google, it's like the search results would be kind of empty.
Does it even require a penalty? Do you not just need to rank whatever shows when you get there? So if it's an interstitial, then the content on the interstitial links into that interstitial, everything else. That's what's ranking, not the page. There's no penalty required as such.
That might be another approach, yeah.
If that's what they want to show people when they land on that page, that is that page.
Sometimes, yeah.
You
guys really don't like interstitials.
No.
It's good. OK. Now,
John, can I ask a question?
It sounds like it's going to be into seconds and so on, because, I mean, marketers in the end of the day have things they want and conversions and stuff like that. And, I mean, I guess the design has to be laid out differently, John, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of ways that you can get information from your users as well without blocking them when they come and visit your website.
Right.
Mihai, you had a question.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me OK?
Yes.
This is about JavaScript redirects. We have a client that used to have a website on domain.com, and they wanted to change to WordPress, but somehow they ended up installing WordPress in a subfolder. The idea is they didn't want to bother like moving the WordPress back to the main domain, so they left it in the subfolder, and until now they use the JavaScript redirect from the main domain to the subfolder whenever somebody was accessing it. And I just want to ask, how do you treat JavaScript redirects when it comes to like moving ranking signals along the redirect?
We should be able to forward those normally. So one of the tricky things there is we kind of have to render that page in order to see that JavaScript redirect. But depending on the way that the JavaScript redirect is made, so if it's like directly in a code snippet on the page itself, not an embedded script, then that's something we can pick up just from crawling the page. We'll see that, oh, it does this redirect. We can just follow that directly. So that's the ideal situation. If it's like an external script, we have to follow that embedded script and render the page to see the redirect. Then it takes a bit longer for us to pick that up. But in both of these cases, we will see that as a redirect, and we will try to pick a canonical between those two URLs and pass all of the signals that we have to that URL. So if we see that as a redirect and we say, OK, the redirection target is the one that we want to have indexed as canonical, then we will forward all of those signals that we have to that target.
Okay, that's interesting because if I do like a site query or search for the brand, I see that Google indexes the content, indexes the URLs, but the main page shows up without the subfolder. So like for the main brand query, it shows up the main domain without the subfolder. Does that mean that Google didn't choose a canonical correctly, or is this just how Google does when it comes to something that's, you know, the whole website is a query related to the whole website, the brand or something like that?
Yeah. So it's hard to say correctly or not when it comes to canonicalization, but we take like multiple factors into account for canonicalization. And one of them is like internal links. So maybe a lot of the internal links are to the root and not to that specific folder, maybe. Another thing we take into account is the URL length. So if it's a shorter URL, we'll try to pick that one, which kind of might play a role here. If the subfolder is significantly long, it definitely plays a role if you have like a lot of parameters at the end of the URL. Then we'll say, oh, this cleaner, shorter URL is nicer than this longer one. We'll take the shorter one. But in the end, all of these factors kind of get added up. And we say, well, for this URL, we come up with this score. For this URL, we come up with a different score. And this one is better, so we'll pick that one as a canonical. So I wouldn't necessarily see this as something that's broken or that would be causing any problems with the site's rankings. Essentially, it's just a matter of which URL is shown. It will just rank with the same signals.
OK, well, I just pasted the URL just if you want to, you know, check if
sure.
You read it correctly. I'm just curious whether I should recommend, you know, just do a 301 classic redirect instead, and, you know, no worries afterwards.
I don't know. I mean, you can do that. Sometimes that's easier done. Sometimes that's not as easily done. So I don't think you would have any advantage when it comes to rankings if you did a 301. So essentially, we've collected those signals. If we put it on this URL or that URL, in the search results, it'll essentially be the same.
Oh, OK, got it.
All right. We managed to make it to the end without everything breaking, which is fantastic, which means that maybe this new platform will work after all. We'll have to figure something out for the Q&A. It kind of works with the new setup, but I guess we could be improving that a bit. Sorry about all the other questions that were submitted before, which I didn't get to. I probably need to double check the next couple Hangouts to make sure that they're set up properly. But hopefully, we'll have a chance to get together again in the future at some point.
There was also some 403 errors on the links. 3 or 4 people had the same. I had the 403 for the first 5 or 10 minutes.
OK.
So did some other people that posted on the wall of the.
All right. All right.
This wasn't working.
OK. I'll double check to see if I can figure anything out there. That's good to know. OK. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. And with that, let's take a break here. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your questions and comments. Very appreciated. And we'll see you again in the future again. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, John.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.